everyone, my name's Jillian Arany, and I'm a fisheries biologist for the Confederacy Mainland Mi'kmaq under their aquatics program, the Mi'kmaq Conservation Group. And I'm going to talk to you today about our chain pickerel project, which we also refer to as chain pickerel in Mi'kmaqi. So like I said, I work for CMM, which is the Confederacy Mainland Mi'kmaq, under the aquatics program, which is the Mi'kmaq Conservation Group. So I'll just give a bit of background about the organization. So CMM is a tribal council and nonprofit organization, and the mission statement is to proactively promote and assist Mi'kmaq communities' initiatives towards self-determination and enhancement of community. The CMM delivers a variety of community programs and advisory services to First Nations communities in Nova Scotia. The CMM receives financial support from various government departments, both federal and provincial, as well as the private sector. So the CMM uses that funding to support programs and services primarily in its 8-member communities in Nova Scotia. And the governing body of CMM is made up of chiefs from the 8-member communities. So MCG is the aquatics program that's administered by CMM that started back in 2011-2012, and the mission statement of MCG is to restore the concept and practice of Naduculum in Nova Scotia's watersheds. So this concept of Naduculum is based on showing respect to the lands and waters and taking only what is needed and wasting nothing and leaving enough for the next 7 generations. And so a lot of the work we do at MCG has a two-eyed seeing approach, which incorporates Western knowledge and kind of Western science along with Indigenous knowledge and brings the two together. And MCG is really committed to enhancing the engagement and education of the member communities, including youth, on a number of environmental issues, conservation issues, and natural resources work. So MCG works under the direction of CMM's board of directors, but MCG also has an advisory board, and so it's the direction from the board of directors and the advisory board that kind of determines the projects and what kind of work we do. So like I mentioned, our projects come from our advisory board as well as our board of directors, but also from concerns of community members. So that's actually what started our chain pickerel project, which we also call chain pickerel in Mi'kmaqi, because we started getting some concerns from our advisory community and community members that chain pickerel were starting to appear in waterways that they weren't in before, and that they were starting to go after species at risk, such as Atlantic salmon, which has a large significant value to the Mi'kmaq people. So that was kind of what started the project, is the concern for species at risk and how chain pickerel are going to be impacting that. So what we decided to do is we created the chain pickerel project, and we kind of went in the direction that our advisory committee and board of directors wanted us to go. And that basically led us to have a project that has 3 main parts. So the first part is funded under the Aboriginal Fund for Species at Risk, which is the AFSAR program. And that includes stomach content analysis on chain pickerel, doing invasive species outreach, and also doing an Indigenous knowledge workshop. The next part is funded under the Habitat Stewardship Program, HSP. And that involved EDNA surveys and electrofishing surveys. And the last part is our partnership with the Clean Annapolis River Project, which is really focused on outreach and education on invasive species and especially their impacts on species at risk. So now I'll just go into more details about each part of the project. So the first part is the AFSAR activities. So the first part of the AFSAR project is doing stomach content analysis on chain pickerel. We know that there are Atlantic salmon smolt that run in the Stewiacke River during the spring because one of the other parts of the AFSAR project is doing smolt counts. So we know that the smolt are there, and we also know that chain pickerel are there. It's been brought to us by our community members as well as just knowing from surveys that they are in that body of water. So we wanted to look to see if they were having an impact on the Atlantic salmon smolt in the Stewiacke River. So in 2019, that was the first year that we did this activity. So what we did is we went fishing, and we also used a beach seine, which is a big net, in the Stewiacke River, coinciding with when the smolt wheel was running, so we knew that there were Atlantic salmon smolt in the river at the same time. So we wanted to catch chain pickerel and then dissect their stomachs to see if they had any Atlantic salmon smolt in them. And we actually only caught 5 pickerel last spring, and we didn't find any smolts in their stomach contents, which was good news, but also not to say that they're not predating on them. We're going to expand on this activity in the next year, so in this field season. And we're going to beach seine a couple more spots and angle in a few different locations to see if we can catch more pickerel and bigger pickerel as well, because like the little chain pickerel that we caught might not have even been big enough to be preying on the salmon smolts just based on size. So we're hoping to get some more data by doing more field sites, but it was nice to see that there were no salmon smolts in their stomachs, but again, like I said, that's not to say that they're not getting predated on. It just means that the ones that we caught didn't have any smolts in their stomach. But with each fish we caught, we did dissect their stomach, and we also removed the chlorethrum, which is kind of a bone behind the gills, which you can use to age the fish, just like you count the rings on a tree. So it's a pretty neat way to determine how old the fish are without having to go through any labs. You could just kind of put it up to the light and you can see the rings on it, which is pretty neat. So that was the stomach content analysis part of the project. Another big component to the work that we do is outreach and education to youth in the communities. So one thing we got to do this year was Let's Catch Chain Pickerel Fishing Day, which we got to do with grades 5 to 8 from LSK School, which is the school in Sibonagadick. So we want to increase engagement of community members in the work that we do, and so we really wanted to get them involved with the beach seining and angling activity I had just talked about. But our field season last year was a little crazy with just the water levels were really unpredictable and the weather, so we weren't very consistent with going out and the times that we were going out. So we didn't get as many people involved as we wanted to. So I reached out to our funder and proposed having a fishing day with students from LSK. There's actually a hot spot in the community, as I like to call it. This one particular pond that's been brought to my attention many times because of the number of chain pickerel located there. They were obviously placed there somehow because they are an invasive species, and they were never in this pond before, and they have just multiplied, and the pond is basically full of pickerel now. So it's a really good fishing spot if you're looking to fish pickerel. So thankfully we're able to coordinate with the principal at the school, and the students were bused down to this area. We had enough rods, lure, and tackle for everyone, and there were about 50 students that took part, and it was really awesome. So what we did is we basically told everyone to go out and fish, and so we provided some of the tackle, the school provided some of the tackle, and we also had some time, as you can see in the pictures, to kind of discuss chain pickerel and the impacts they're having with all of these youth. And it was a really fun day, and so a few pickerel were caught, and then we gave a demonstration of how to fillet pickerel, because you can actually eat them. And it was just a really good education event, so people became aware of chain pickerel, and some of the kids were telling me that it was the first time they'd ever been out fishing, so that was really fun. And this event took place in 2019, and that was also International Year of the Salmon, so we found it really important to make a point about teaching about Atlantic salmon and some of the threats they face, and one of those threats is chain pickerel. And another thing that we did here, and to note that we do in a lot of our field work, is because the chain pickerel we do kill, we do a tobacco offering. Just as a sign of respect for the fish, because even though they are invasive and they're not from here, we are still taking a fish's life, and it's just a nice sign of respect from the Mi'kmaq culture is to do a tobacco offering, so we make sure to do that for any of the fish that we kill. So we did that on the fishing day as well, and kind of let everyone know why we were doing it and the significance. So that was a really fun event that we got to hold this fall, and we're hoping to host some more, and we've been asked to host some more because the students really enjoyed it. So just some more of the outreach that we do about invasive species. We have lesson plans created that kind of show the impacts that chain pickerel have. So this was one that was created by the summer student that worked on this project, and it's basically a game that shows what happens when chain pickerel get into an ecosystem and how easily they take over and get rid of all other species, and all that's left is chain pickerel. So the summer student Dylan made a really fun game last summer that they got to play at some of the outreach events we had. We also have outreach magnets that we're handing out, and we have lots if anyone's interested in getting them. It basically just tells people that they're an invasive species, and if they catch them, to let us know, because we work together with other groups across the province, including Inland Fisheries. So if ever we get information about chain pickerel and where they are in new locations where they might not have been recorded before, it's really important that we keep track of them and see where they're moving. So yeah, we have these magnets. It's just something people can carry with them, put it in their tackle box or put it on their fridge, and yeah, can easily get a hold of us, or if people want to get involved with the project, there's contact information on the magnets as well. One huge outreach thing that we have been working on is the chain pickerel cookbook as well, and it's almost ready for distribution. The cookbook actually has 10 recipes of how to use chain pickerel, because the bag limit per person per day in Nova Scotia for pickerel, depending on where you are, is 100 fish. So that's a lot of fish, and if you can find a really great way to use them, why not? So we've created this chain pickerel cookbook, and it will be up on the MCG Facebook page and website very soon, and we'll also have some hard copies available, and it can be distributed by email as well. So like I mentioned before, a lot of the work we do at MCG, we like to take from a two-eyed seeing approach, so incorporating Western science and Indigenous knowledge. So one of the things we did this year was we had a workshop, and we got to identify sites that were of concern for community members, but also sites of where Atlantic salmon had been in the past or currently. So we can kind of map both of those and combine them and look at overlapping areas and pick our field sites for the next year. So that's one of the ways that we incorporate that two-eyed seeing approach. So MCG often has workshops of this nature, and it's a really great way to help pick our field sites and make sure that the sites that we're looking at and the sites that we're visiting are of importance. So that was the AFSAR activities. The next one I'm going to talk about is the Habitat Stewardship Program activity. So the Habitat Stewardship Program project is what we often call our culverts project, and that project looks at remediation of barriers to fish passage in the Stewiacke watershed. And so the project kind of focuses on making sure fish have barrier-free access to different habitats or feeding grounds. And so what's come up now is that if we're going to be making any remediation, so essentially fixing a culvert and making sure that fish can pass through it, we have to be cautious of invasive species like chain pickerel, because because of the barrier the chain pickerel aren't able to move, then maybe that barrier is actually what's keeping the invasive species out. So because we need to figure out the presence absence of an invasive species before doing any of the remediations, we've incorporated some chain pickerel work into this project as well. So last year what we got to do was do EDNA surveys, which is environmental DNA. So think about it basically like a person. If you shed hair or skin, you're leaving DNA. Well, fish do that in their environment as well. And so eDNA is essentially taking a water sample and then filtering that sample and looking for that specific DNA, so you can tell if the fish is there without actually having to catch them. So we did that upstream of all of the 10 sites that were planned for remediation, and then downstream we did electrofishing, which is a type of survey that essentially shocks the water and brings fish to the surface, and then you can easily net them. It doesn't hurt the fish, but just gives them like a temporary shock. They float to the surface and you can catch them in the nets like you see behind me in the picture. And like you can see in my hands, we caught a chain pickerel that way. And so we didn't actually know if electrofishing was going to work for chain pickerel because of the way they move and just how they swim, but it was successful and we caught some chain pickerel and were actually able to determine their presence and absence at those 10 sites. So we found at 3 of our sites they were absent, they were present at 6 of them, and then we didn't get a permit for the last one, but it was good to try these 2 different types of surveys to see which one works best for pickerel, and they both seem to work. And the last part of our project is our partnership project with the Clean Annapolis River Project. And this, like I said, is focused on outreach and education about invasive species and their impacts on species at risk. So I'm sure Sam is going to go more in depth when Clean Annapolis River Project does their presentation as well. So I'll just give a quick overview of our partnership project. So for the outreach, we're doing angler surveys, so learning about what anglers know about invasive species, if they're seeing more of them, where are they seeing them, and this is a lot focused in Southwest Nova Scotia, but also open to anywhere if people want to provide that information. We have magnets for this as well, so people can learn about what chain pickerel and smallmouth bass look like. Our project focused mostly on chain pickerel, but this partnership project also has a component that works on smallmouth bass. So just getting these magnets into the hands of as many people to know that these 2 species are invasive species, and just for people's education and awareness, because people might not necessarily know that they are invasive. We're doing a lot of events that we can do. A lot of these have been put on hold due to the current COVID-19 situation, but we like doing outreach events, whether they're at wildlife parks or just education days. We go out to outreach events with the Clean Annapolis River Project. And there's also a 2-eyed seeing day, which should be coming up in the fall. That's going to be an in-person interactive day just to learn about invasive species and more outreach and just increasing awareness about invasive species and their impacts. And lastly, as part of this project, we have these awesome signs that are going to be put up hopefully sometime soon. As soon as we're able to go out to the parks and install them, we will be doing that. And they're just as well as an educational tool to let people know what these fish look like and what to do if they see them, and just to report any sightings, because it's really helpful information for us to know. And yeah, these will be put up all around the province of Nova Scotia, so they might be at some of your favorite fishing spots. The ones that MCG will be installing, one will be going up at Oakfield Provincial Park, which is where Grand Lake is, as we know that that lake is quite full of pickerel. And the other one will be at the Stewiacke River Park, because like I mentioned, for our beach seine and angling surveys, we do it close to the Stewiacke River. Stewiacke River Park is the closest landmark, so it'll be really nice to have the sign there because it's really close to the area that we're working. All right, that's going to conclude my presentation on chain pickerel in Mi'kma'ki, which is our chain pickerel project at the Mi'kmaq Conservation Group. If you want to learn more about the project or get involved, feel free to reach out to us through our Facebook or Instagram. If you want some magnets or just want to get some more information, we're always willing to talk. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned something new.